So we're here with Eric Dollard. This is middle of January 2014, and we just went over the new book he's working on, which is part 2 to the four-quadrant representation of electricity, which goes into all the polyphase mathematics, unifying that with the music of Bach. You can look for that video on YouTube, and there'll be links posted in Eric Dollard's thread. And if you don't know, Eric Dollard's username in Energetic Forum is T-Rex, like the dinosaur. Okay, so Eric's current project is an Advanced Seismic Warning System, which is the most sensitive, most advanced earthquake warning system ever developed. But before we touch on that, we just want to cover just a couple points on the cosmic induction generator. The last couple times I was down here at EPD Laboratories, which is Eric's nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting his work. John Polakowski was here working on the cosmic induction generator. You can see some of the photos posted in Energetic Forum, and I took quite a few pictures and video footage, which will be coming out pretty soon. And so for quite a few of you who have been following Eric and his work and the different campaigns going on to raise funds, the Cosmic Induction Generator project is moving forward. And when I was down here, John had put it all together, and with Eric's assistance, Eric was tuning it up, and it was a successful run. It worked. John Polakowski is going to be, releasing more information on that. I'll be putting out some videos and photos on these successful tests, showing it actually working. And in the meantime, John is going to be working on a higher power supply for this to increase the effects. And what the cosmic induction generator does. And John will be presenting and giving a live demonstration of the cosmic induction generator at the 2014 Science and Technology Conference, which you can find out about in energeticforum.com or energyscienceforum.com. And so just so that you know, a lot of the support of Eric's work over the last 6-9 months plus has been very fruitful. The experiments are moving forward with the cosmic induction generator, and it's been a great success so far, and you'll get to see that pretty soon. So on the side of that, Eric is working on the Advanced Seismic Warning System, which is an earthquake forecasting system where he's able to translate these earth signals down in the earth into sound or different we say signals on scopes and different types of measuring devices that can take these different signals, and he can plot these out and basically show kind of what's going on. And any earthquake, maybe about 6.5 and above, he's able to show you the activity leading up to that, up to 48 hours ahead of time, which obviously the implications of that, besides it being just an fairly profound science project or experiment, is that the bottom line is that potentially this can save lives when this type of system is replicated and put up through replicated in multiple parts around the world. So do you want to talk a little bit about the earthquake system? I think most people that's following your work know about it from Landers.
Yeah, Landers was a fully engineered working facility that actually did pick up precursors of major earthquakes. Ironically, the first one was the Landers earthquake, which, if I wasn't there myself at the time, but the people that were there operating the equipment gave me the rundown on what had transpired electrically. It started about 2 days beforehand, and then about 18 hours before the actual event became so severe that the property owner and the operator of the equipment started making emergency telephone calls to his electronics tech at the Marine base next door to us, until finally the guy came out and determined that something was going on. And then sure enough, the next morning was the earthquake. The electrical activity of the earthquake was so intense that this particular technician, who also at that time serviced televisions in the town of Yucca Valley and 29 Palms, had found that the telluric currents had reached such a magnitude that the magnetic field resulting from those currents had permanently magnetized the shadow mass in the television picture tubes and rendered them junk because they could not be demagnetized. The magnitude of current impulse to do that would have to be in the order of 5 or 10 million amps. So I take a certain radio frequency component out of this. Basically, the signals, the telluric signals themselves initially were regarded as interference, and they're a significant interference impairment to Navy submarine communications, and that's kind of how this whole project came about with RCA. RCA wanted me to develop a new type of communications medium for the maritime business, which I did. The telluric transmission transformer from basically Tesla's design, the cosmic induction generator being two of them shorted on each other so they can't transmit but concentrate the field. So we're basically, all these projects are pretty much unified on the basic electrostatic Tesla technology. So then that was the initial system at Landers. So once I had the frequencies and the time periods and everything identified, then I could start to actually engineer networks to extract these frequencies and deliver them to relays or chart recorders or sounders or whatever. Plus, the sounds of the signals themselves are audible. There is access to these sounds on a very limited basis through the special electrostatic amplifiers that are built by a person named Steve McGreevy, who has a website on this where you can actually hear some of these earth sounds. Some of them are so fantastic they're beyond belief. I think that's the best introduction people can get, is to find Steve McGreevy's website, and he will custom build a electrostatic amplifier receiving system for you where you can start to gain access to these signals, but without a full-size Alexanderson antenna and the proper grounding system, the interference from power lines, all these things become magnified in these devices, so you have to get out into the wilderness in order to properly receive, and you still ultimately can't reject all the interference, but it's a very cheap and easy way to start.
So his name is Steve McGreevy. I think one of his websites might be Auroral Chorus, something like that.
Yes, that sounds right, yeah.
And so he's known for using like these big loop type antennas or something, and he's picking up sounds from the Aurora Borealis.
And from the inside of the Earth and
Okay.
many other places, but the devices cannot distinguish between the signals. It takes a more advanced antenna system.
Okay.
So you could, with a keen ear, with one of Steve McGreevy's devices in an interference-free location, as long as there's no wind generating electrostatic or there's no coyotes running around with, sparks on their hair. These things are very sensitive, but in the proper circumstance, you can hear the earthquake signals with your own ear before the earthquake happens.
Mm-hmm. So this is probably what animals are sensitive to and picking up on when earthquake is about to happen, and dogs and cats and all kinds of animals go crazy and they're running away, and
Sound.
yeah, they're basically able to
They hear it.
they can hear those.
Yeah, well, for example, a situation I had when I first put this thing together at Landers is there's a very, very, very powerful Navy submarine transformer at Jim Creek, Washington, I believe, 2 million watts, that thunders out an electromagnetic wave in a vain attempt to get it to the submarines underwater. It kind of works, but it's pretty brute force. 2 million watts is the full output of 1.5 to 2 railroad locomotives. So that's a lot of RF. So this RF gets into all these devices that I'm talking about, but you can't hear that high.
Mm-hmm.
But my pet coyote, would be irritated by the speakers that were on all the time down at Landers with that background noise, because it hears the 25 kc. And then on top of that, I found that in the years of living in my car out in the deep desert, there's a geological formation which sometimes are called crystal hills, which are little hills that are all like broken up pieces of quartz. And what I noticed one very, very quiet night with the car parked on top of one of these things is because of the electromechanical reality of quartz and being piezoelectric and converting from electrical to mechanical and back again is that the signals that were coming out of the loudspeakers at Landers, I could faintly hear coming out of the rocks because there was a big telluric event going on that night and the rocks were singing. Another thing I learned at Landers, because I also had a mechanical seismograph, which is probably the most sensitive in existence. It has a gain of 1 million over the standard USGS seismograph. So sensitive that, you know, you can see the impulses of coyotes running around out in the desert. And when you look at the oscilloscope and you're watching the waveforms, you'll see on the oscilloscope all of a sudden a low frequency wave will come through. And because you're looking at it, that sound in the background that you normally ignore because it's a jet in the distance or it's a big rig out on the highway, well, this time it's not. So a lot of these background noises that, you know, the technological society is generating that basically numbs your system to regard it as noise, is there's a fraction of those sounds that are actually coming out of mountains and rock formations. Very deep thundering sounds. So this is one thing I learned at Landers, and the next step was to couple that into the Bose 901 speakers so that you can actually hear in stereo the vibrations inside the earth and feel them through the speakers. So that's basically what I'm trying to reconstruct here. The total loss of the electromagnetic and electrostatic research facility at Landers, $1.5 million of equipment, most of which I can't go back to RCA and get cases of insulators or...
And that whole facility was built up over 2 generations?
2 generations, starting back with George Van Tassel. These people that I originally worked with there personally knew George Van Tassel. I started on this at the Integratron. It was taken away from me by the same group that follows me wherever I go to disrupt my work, which obviously is very alive right now. There's a major effort by these people to defame me and disrupt everything I'm doing as much as possible. It's made this effort much, much more difficult.
So Landers basically got lost in a big real estate scam with all this
Yeah,
legal paperwork. And
the will was overturned without my knowledge. You know, they had me sign papers and do things that I didn't really know what it was about, to basically shoot myself in the foot. And then all of a sudden the place went up for sale. And because the trustee that Walt had left to manage this was a very untrustworthy person, and he needed a new Harley Davidson motorcycle, and he sold the whole installation out. And I managed to hold on for a while under a new property owner who turns out to be an acknowledged real estate criminal who milked me and led me to believe that everything was going to be fine, complete the facility, and then put it up for a $750,000 ransom after I was done.
Now, there's not a whole lot of pictures of this Landers facility, but the handful of photos that we were going through last night are, you know, I mean, incredible. The rack with the chart recorders, the scopes, the communication system, and the telluric system. Is that just one part of the whole Landers facility?
Yeah, Landers was a very broad radio frequency facility that covered frequencies from the audible range all the way up into the microwave. So the large antenna arrays there. There was a system there that I had that was called the Earth Stereo, where there was 2 very large HF antenna arrays. Each array occupies between 1 and 5 acres, so you need a lot of land and a lot of poles and wires to build these things. But they went up. I did it all by myself. And what this would do is you find a station that's transmitting music from, you know, Pakistan or India or, you know, Japan or someplace like that. And then with this antenna system, is you receive the signals and their echoes as they bounce around through the Earth ionosphere waveguide, and it produces a type of stereo that no words can describe. It's a unique type of stereo, and that's part of my research. It's a type of stereo where the sound leaves the plane of the speakers, and you might have a musical instrument, and you cannot, no way that you can, your mind sees or hears, the instrument will move around in the room, and you can actually, it's so tangible that you can grasp for it. It's a space positional type stereo, and the Earth generates this. So I used to get numerous visits from all my musician friends and ballinists to come down and fire up the Earth stereo system and listen to these wild pieces of music coming out of places like Pakistan and what have you through this Earth stereo system. And there we had AR2A speakers, and it's just absolutely stunning. So that was one thing that was going on there. Is another thing is the FCC and the NSA and all of them have pretty much dropped any policing of the HF spectrum, which has allowed all kinds of interference and disruption and distortion in services due to bad maintenance. So I also supplied intelligence to the proper government agencies to let them know when other government agencies were screwing up, or if there was a source of interference to important signals, because I could determine the location, identify the signals, and actually relay the signals to the person at the other end through the system at Landers. It had a telephone radio interface where you could call that station and it would contact the PRC-47 in my car, or I could use the PRC-47 in my car to make contact with the station and then get back on the telephone line. So it had that. It also had wideband spectral analysis facilities where the entire HF spectrum could be seen, UHF spectrum for determining origins of signals and their nature. So it was a very sophisticated research center. It was something like normally, it would be beyond even what the FCC would have in the time during which the equipment was built.
Okay, so getting back into the earthquake forecasting system, the Advanced Seismic Warning System. So basically, in block diagram format, so you'd have an antenna array.
You have a split antenna array consisting of a pair of antennas. One's called the beverage antenna, which receives the electromagnetic and electrostatic impulses from the space outside of the physical mass of the Earth.
Okay.
And then you have an Alexanderson antenna, which does not respond to electrical signals or fields external to the Earth, but only the ones on the interior. That way, then you can separate what's being generated by the aurora or what's being generated by lightning from what's being generated from the interior of the Earth. And this goes through a very sophisticated amplifier system, which took many years to develop, where the entire composite of the low band spectrum all the way up into the AM band all flows through the amplifiers simultaneously without any intermodulation or distortion to get the proper waveforms without any ringing or shifting. Your equipment has to be clean so that it doesn't modify the waveform so that these transient impulses come through pure and undistorted. Extremely difficult. And then there was a heterodyning, wideband heterodyning system. This whole thing took 10 years to build, where you could get into the frequencies that you couldn't hear through a heterodyning process and then analyze them on an acoustical level where they're up in the high frequency, only the dogs hear, they can bring them down into where you can hear, and then you can start to hear the dynamics of this electrical process that builds before an earthquake start at the frequency ranges of its origin occur even longer before the earthquake. So there's a whole week-long process that possibly is developing here. Unfortunately, upon completion of this whole system, it was taken away from me.
So, so the system obviously is not theoretical. You've done it, you know how to do it, and you're in the process of getting everything together. And as a matter of fact, you already have governmental approval to do this system on government land again.
Right.
And so...
this time, being that it's on government land, there's not going to be any real estate complication.
Right.
But the complication is I'm required to provide a substantial bond, which is way beyond my financial resources. So this is going to have to be a public funding situation. Otherwise, the rest of it is pretty much covered.
So we're going to be putting together a new fundraising campaign. Adam Bull and myself are going to be working on this, and this will actually be on Indiegogo, like the last campaign. And short-term immediate needs is the $10,000 to be able to raise money for the bond,
Yeah.
and then your estimate is maybe about $15,000 worth of equipment.
Yeah, because I have to buy, and hope that I can find them. I have to get a whole new set of chart recorders. I have to get the racks to put them in. These equipment racks are, they cost us almost as much as buying a used car.
Right?
The prices of this stuff is just, and the oscilloscopes I'll have to make from scratch. So that will be about $15,000 right there in materials and effort. As far as the wires and the cross arms and what have you, is we've been provided with enough abandoned telephone facilities which exist on government property that they need taken down or cleaned up. So we're in the process of harvesting miles and miles of wire, truckloads of cross arms and insulators in which to build this thing, and the only basic cost of that is the gasoline and the food and and what have you to go out there and do this. We have video footage of the process beginning in another one of our experimental locations, and it's all underway. Basically, what minor donations that I received through the mail and Social Security, it's possible for me to do all this without any major funding as far as the wires and the poles and that end of it. But the problem that you face in this society is these insurances and bonds, and that's something that now has thrown a monkey wrench in the whole situation that I have to overcome.
So with the already having the poles and the wires and that part of the project, as far as wires, cross arms, insulators, that kind of stuff, being able to have access to that is already saving thousands and thousands and thousands of
Untold
dollars.
thousands of dollars.
Not to mention time saved because of the fact that a lot of these poles are already erected.
Yeah, we have 54 poles to work with on our installation from a previously existing facility at 175-foot spacing. That's quite a transmission structure.
And that alone would take, what, months and months? Or,
Oh, I don't know. If I have to go out and dig all those holes myself,
yeah.
And find the poles and drag them out
Right.
there and put them up. About 5 of the poles, are disintegrated and need to be replaced, and they're all busted. There's a couple more dead end poles that'll have to go up. Those are available locally from the junk collectors and what have you around here. It's kind of a junkyard town, so we can get kind of in between stuff. The municipality itself is supporting our project along with the federal government, which is basically an unheard of situation. I mean, it's fantastic the way that all this is coming together. It's just
Right.
leaving everybody flabbergasted how, something that would normally be so much red tape and complications and hassles and denials is all just flowing like water. This is a very rare and valuable circumstance.
And it's very, rare and valuable technology. I mean, the implications are very profound. And for $25,000 to be able to get another functional earthquake warning system is, it's priceless, because the implications are once that's rebuilt, that's going to be able to attract more funding where that type of system could be replicated. And essentially, if there's, say 3 in different areas, you could actually not only detect that an earthquake is coming, but you can pretty much pinpoint where it's going to happen.
Exactly.
And so, for $25,000 for the potential to save, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people's lives, over the years is, it's a no-brainer. And so this telluric Advanced Seismic Warning System, so from landers, you have a lot of the chart recorder rolls, which we looked at yesterday. I don't know if we want to go into those, or I can just
I think
splice in some video,
the video
and
because
pictures.
It's difficult to go through the rolls.
So yesterday we went through some of the chart recorder rolls showing the different earth activity and so forth, and you can see where it's building up, and suddenly you have the earthquake. And this is showing from anywhere from 18 to 48 hours ahead of time that you can see the activity building up.
Yeah, the chart rolls that I have were not of actually any. There was no major earthquakes in that vicinity during that test period. But there were other earthquakes close by, particularly as we'll see by looking at the charts, the one in Mexico that did show the electric component. The telluric signals that are associated with the earthquake will not propagate more than about 150 miles.
Okay.
Which is good, because that way then you're not confused by, something happening off in the distance. So you can build a network of stations in a 150-mile sided triangle then and determine the situation. But the Beveridge antenna, not the underground antenna, but the overground antenna will pick up the reflections of the earth becomes so intensely active electrically that the waves refract through the surface of the earth, refract through the ionosphere, and will come back down to distant locations. And this is what's happened with the Japan earthquake. Unfortunately, we lost the station immediately afterwards, and all the records were lost. The story of Eric Dollard's life, but I can recount what had happened, and the County Board of Supervisors was there to see it also, so there must be some record of it somewhere in San Bernardino. They took pictures of the deal as the overground electrical activity chart went off the scale 1 hour before the precursor earthquake happened in Japan. It maintained a off-the-scale level. I had an attenuation in the system to keep it on the chart so that I could see the variations up into the big event, and then it dissipated. Now, the one that happened in Mexico, which was closer to the station, did the same thing, and that actually is recorded on the station log chart hanging on the wall outside, and I can show that.
Okay. So following this, I'll put in some video of yesterday going through some of the charts and some photographs, and then right after that we'll go and look at the chart where you hand plotted data from multiple sensors,
Right.
Earth sensors,
Antennas,
and antennas, all kinds of
geophones, things that listen to the earth vibrations that drive the seismograph.
which you'll be able to visually see how the different events correlate
Right.
and
Yeah.
build up to an earthquake.
Right.
Now, right here on the wall, we have a chart, and this is basically what you hand plotted data over an entire year.
This is 1 year of the information in the station log as regard to the magnitudes or amplitudes or whatever was graphically put into a long-term basis. That information was broadcast daily out of the transmitter there at Landers, so that I could receive it at other locations, and other people could too. On the amateur radio band, the signal carried all the way to Japan, so
Right.
it was pretty widespread. Everyone could get this information that knew about it and had a way to copy Morse code. So I took 1 year's worth of data and plotted it to see what it looked like in the time domain, and a lot of very revealing things presented themselves.
So how many different pieces of data are you putting together?
So what we have is, this is what's going here. So this is what's called the solar flux.
Okay, that's the red one on the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the, basically the radiative output of the sun. It's measured at 2,800 megacycles, and it's in watts per square centimeter. So basically it's kind of the radio power output of the sun, and it's termed the solar flux.
Okay.
The one on the top here, this is the daily number over a 24-hour period. So each day there's a different point. The total number of significant vibrational impulses that are picked up out of the earth. So that's a vibration counter.
Like physical, mechanical stress?
Mechanical jumping of the earth. So
Okay.
in other words, if the earth starts to vibrate, the counter starts to count those vibrations.
Okay.
And then that number is recorded at the start of the next day. The counter's reset, and
Okay.
so that produces every day. There's a number of vibrations, and because it's such a widespread variation, this is on a logarithmic basis. So anytime you double the amplitude, you're going up 10 times. So if you have 4 times, then it's 100, and if you go, if you see what I mean.
Kind of like
So,
Richter scale
Richter
style.
scale, yeah,
Right.
otherwise it wouldn't want to stay on the paper.
Right.
Because one day the counter might read 350, and the next day it might read 7,500, or another day it might read 150,000. So you have to have a logarithmic. So this is ground vibration. This is the telluric earth antenna system. The beverage antenna is in red. That's the electrical activity
The above ground.
above ground. It's weighted by a set of analog networks to respond best to crashing static noises and impulses and signals that are not coherent, which would be produced by lightning, tornadoes, hurricanes, and other sources of electrical interference. Solar noise, which constitutes the general interference to the system. The green one is the telluric underground antenna. So what these are peak signal amplitudes for one day. So I will read the highest number on the chart for that day, and then that goes in the log. So if the chart recorder is at a certain level and that recording interval in the morning, and then you go back and through the 24 hours and you find the highest spot on the chart for that day, then that is the number that's selected for that.
And that's the green line.
The green and the red lines do
Okay.
both that. So now with the telluric thing, the weighting networks are the opposite. It's looking for a musical sound.
Okay.
It's designed to reject crashing noises, static impulses, and sparking sounds, or any of that type of stuff. It's looking for that particular musical signal that occurs before an earthquake. So that way then you get what it is and what it ain't, so to speak, comparison.
Right.
Which is basically the Alexanderson way of what he called his barrage receiver, where is you deliberately had one system pick up all the interference and noise so that, what do you want to?
Yeah. Go over here a little bit.
Okay, so that you can reject that. So that's because ultimately the surface of the earth is going to refract the exterior signals inward and the interior signals outward, so it's very difficult to get the complete separation. So altogether, you can see how all these various phenomena interact. Now, the vertical lines are major earthquakes. To the best of my ability to get out of the log, because a lot of the time I wasn't there. There was a station operator that was taking this data. He was not a very reliable individual, but he did manage to hold together and get all this down. Some of this stuff was a little hard to read, but I'll pretty much have all the major earthquakes and their names to see how they fit into this whole electrical scheme. Now what's interesting is during interval of low solar flux, where it's climbing, you can also see that the vibration of the earth seemed to be maintaining at quite a regular level, but as the solar flux starts to go up, it's very clear that the vibration of the earth starts to go up. Until, unfortunately, there was no data right here at an important point, but you can infer the curve, and right when this whole wave of solar activity passes, the vibration of the earth seems to want to reach some kind of peak where here the vibration went off the scale in Landers, and this waveform's peak is in perfect symmetrical correlation with the 7.8 earthquake in Sumatra. So why that particular earthquake caused such widespread ground vibration is a good question itself. You can see at the onset of the solar activity, kind of like the one we're experiencing now, there was quite a cluster of earthquakes, and there was basically a significant earthquake at each solar flux peak. So there's some level of interaction going on here. You can see that the atmospheric level of interference is raised very high during the solar flux activity, which would be expected. There's going to be a lot more lightning and ionospheric disturbances and things making noise. Some of that refracts into the earth. That's the reason for using the pair, because you can see that some of it was getting into the underground system. So these are like a rejection, so that you know that this particular peak here is not necessarily in the earth, but is coming from the outside. You can again see like there's mechanical correlation. There's all kinds of little intricacies in the waveforms here that show how they all connect together.
Right.
The precursor, like the one I got from Japan, is shown here. Now this North Mexico earthquake was out of range tellurically, but not out of range ionospherically, and you can see that this progressive climb started in the overground electrical activity that the antenna picked up from the ionospheric reflection of the signals being generated out of the Earth in Mexico, and went off the scale, probably would be up here somewhere, went off the scale right during the earthquake interval, just as the Japan one did. Japan earthquake did the exact same thing, because the signals were so strong from the Japan earthquake that the ionosphere carried them all the way to landers. So this shows an example of the electrical connection. Unfortunately, there was no major California earthquakes at the time. That was one of the principal aims of this facility, was to record everything that led up to a major California earthquake. So then the Advanced Seismic Warning System would be solidly established at that point. Rather than things that I remember, or somebody operating the station remembers, or lost notes or whatever. At that point, it would be quantified. But the station didn't live that long.
So with the system that you want to put together now, this is the middle of January 2014, and let's just say that there's enough funds to cover the bond, by the middle of February, and there's enough funds for about $15,000 worth of equipment, since you already have the poles and the wire and everything. How long would it take to have like a demonstration, or to finish that system if the $25,000 is raised?
Well, under favorable circumstances, 1 year. But unfortunately, in this part of the world, out in the dead desert in Nevada, there's a lot of times of the year that you can't do anything. So we're pretty much limited to, most of the outdoor work has to occur from April to June, and then again from like October to beginning of December.
So it's not too cold or not too hot.
Not too hot, or windstorms,
the extremes,
or lightning storms, all the different things you have to deal with out there. So that kind of slows stuff down. It's just going to be me and one other person that are going to be doing all this work. So I'm looking at a 1 year, nominally a 1 year, but there could be delays. Now in this particular part of Nevada, there really isn't any expectations of any giant earthquake or anything here, but what's being done is, because this is being supported by the government here, and the telephone company interests and what have you are supplying all the material, and a lot of governmental support. It has to be built here as a demonstrator model, and then once it's demonstrated and the whole system is shown, and of course the seismograph is, wherever the seismograph is, this seismograph is a global system, so the city will get a hold of the seismic information. They'll have the seismograph and the chart recorders and all this stuff in their facilities, so it will show the dynamics of earthquakes. But to say that it's going to save this part of Nevada against a giant earthquake, it doesn't have that application. But what it is, it's more of a demonstrator and reference antenna, and then immediately we're already laying the groundwork for it. I think we have the property. Is going to be provided for us to put another one up right in the San Andreas Fault system, in the San Francisco area. We're hoping that we can do that, and this is going to be the demonstration so that we can present the material to a much less conducive and hostile reality that you have in that part of the world, of being able to do anything, put up a barbed wire fence, not alone build some kind of a mile-long antenna system.
Right. Now now the bond money, this is kind of an emergency situation, because you have 30 days, which means by the middle of February, at least $10,000 has to be raised to be able to pay for the bond.
Yeah, they will want to receive $10,000, and they take it too.
Right.
It doesn't go into a bank account, or I can't get insurance and have a yearly deal. They want $10,000 cash.
Right.
And no more, no less, and 30 days is the requirement, because now that all the paperwork's done and everything's been approved, then they expect that, you just reach into your pocket and pull out $10,000. Well, that's not the easiest thing to do.
And there's already been several $1,000s already spent on application fees and all kinds of other little
Yeah, the application,
and-
monitoring fees, the rent or the lease, however you want to put it, that all came up to about $1,500 already in getting the tools,
right?
the necessary vehicle, and going out and starting to get the cross arms and wires and all that is I consumed over maybe $7,000 already just on that.
Right. So, and if the $10,000 bond money isn't raised in 30 days, then the project is basically going to be rejected.
Yeah, there can be a interval, a grace interval afterwards can be established. It won't be very long. It'll be like another 10 or 30 days. And then it'll be final at that point. The lease will be denied, the whole project will be terminated, and there'll be no possibility of renewal.
Right. And definitely would lose all the money that's already been put in.
Yeah, it'll all go down the toilet bowl.
Right. So, so it's very important that anybody that wants to see this type of project carried forward, and Eric Dollard is the only one who's going to be able to put this kind of project together with this technology. It's very important to, help spread the word and to donate generously. All donations are tax deductible because EPD Laboratories, Inc. is a 501c3 charitable nonprofit organization registered with the state of Nevada, so any of your donations are tax deductible. So please spread the word. It's going to be in the Indiegogo crowdfunding website, and these videos are going to be on YouTube. They're going to be embedded on the Indiegogo website. We'll have information, banners, and links at Energy Science Forum as well as Energetic Forum. Plus, we'll be posting this in Eric's Facebook account, which is Facebook username is Eric P. Dollard. But also, if you go to ericpdollard.com, P stands for Paul. That's his middle initial. ericpdollard.com. Kind of be a portal for all of this stuff. It's a portal for his books. You can support Eric in quite a few different ways. One of them is to go to ericpdollard.com, and in the right column, if you see any of his books or presentations available there, EPD Laboratories will receive, Eric and EPD Laboratories will receive 70% of all the proceeds from those sales, in addition to, and if you look in the left column, there's the address where you can mail checks or money orders directly to EPD Labs. There's a P.O. box there. Also, since recently, you'd probably like to know that EPD Laboratories, a nonprofit itself, which is a completely separate issue from this actual physical building, the lab has actually been saved as far as the nonprofit goes. So the nonprofit 501c3 organization is now in safe and trusted hands. Eric finally has his long-term trusted associates on the board of directors in the roles of secretary and director, and so it's now finally safe to send donations directly to the lab. So you can make checks and money orders or cashier's checks payable to EPD Laboratories Incorporated, and you can mail it to the address at the top left of ericpdollard.com. And also there's a PayPal link. The PayPal email address you can send donations to is info@epdlabs.org. That's info@epdlabs.org. Or you can just click on that PayPal donation link and you can make donations that way. And another way you can donate is that we have a Bitcoin and a Litecoin address set up. I don't believe that those particular type of donations are tax deductible, but if you do want to make donation by Litecoin or Bitcoin, the addresses are on also at the top left of ericpdollard.com. And if you do want to donate, I'd say maybe save them all just for the Indiegogo campaign. That way it's all consolidated in one area and other people can see how much funds have been raised. But just to let you know that those the information to donate by those other ways are on ericpdollar.com. So anyway, Eric, thank you very much for taking the time and explaining all this to us. And we're going to do whatever we can to help make this project a reality. Again, this is not theoretical. This is technology. This Advanced Seismic Warning System is something that Eric has already built. You can see the pictures and some of the videos. And when I get back home, I'm going to take some excerpts out of some video where you're actually walking around landers.
Yeah, we just before it got wrecked, we managed to get some people to help us do kind of a video documentary of the site.
Okay, so look forward to some of those videos. They'll be on YouTube, and links will be all over the place. But we'll also embed some of that video footage of landers, kind of giving a tour of the earthquake system. That'll be embedded into the website on Indiegogo as well. So again, Eric, thank you very much. It's an honor and pleasure to spend time with you, and looking forward to a successful project here.
Okay.
Okay, thanks everybody. Okay, so we got two books here. This one is,
This is the Walter Russell book, which is
Secret of Light.
kind of way out there, where you would normally consider these things. But oddly enough, he has something here called the tornado principle. It shows how as we're seeing on the overground and underground antennas, how the two forces coalesce and draw themselves together in a biconical form until the two apexes meet, and you have the event. What I discovered is, signal-wise, is that tornadoes and volcanoes make the same signals, and earthquakes and hurricanes make the same signals. And this is interesting that it shows how the overground and underground forces combine symmetrically for the event. And I have actually witnessed this visually in conjunction with the receiving equipment at landers, earthquake, lightning, storm conjunctions.
Okay.
So his theory is, he gets into here in his book, showing various alignments and what have you. And then this is the book that Philo Farnsworth gave me to start my work in the versor algebra. This is probably one of the best introductions to electrical math in existence. It's a fantastic book. And again, we have the biconical structure, which is the archetype of all the electrical waveforms. And he shows how it's sectionalized, and you get your mathematical functions by the intersection of the plane. So it's a kind of an interesting coincidence how the Russell's work seems to tie in with the electrical, even though you wouldn't regard Walter Russell as somebody that was an electrical theorist. There's always these interesting coincidences in this stuff. This shows a good how the functions are derived. And this angle of this plane is what I call the angle of hysteresis, and that's what determines between sustained oscillations and impulses, and all the stuff that Steinmetz was talking about all can be geometrically expressed with these figures without the use of any equations. And the equations actually are expressions of these figures.
Now, what did Philo Farnsworth say about the book? What was his
Nothing.
opinion?
He just gave it to me. He never told me why exactly that was so important to him.
Right.
He just said because I'd already started on the Steinmetz system. Well, I learned the Steinmetz system in high school, so I was already using it in the Navy. The Navy accused me of cheating on the test because I come up with the answers so fast, because I used the Steinmetz method and I did not use trigonometry. They didn't like that idea that I was deriving all my results from no more than a pencil, a graph paper, and a machinist ruler, and I'd come up with the right answer. So when I met Philo, I already had known that and was beginning to study the subject, and then he said to carry it one step further to hyperbolic functions, which I did, and then I found that it goes even beyond anything I think he even imagined.
Right.
And then most recently, somebody had mailed me this book, and I'm looking through it, and the words don't particularly make a lot of sense to me, even though there's some really good statements in here that I'm extracting. But the diagrams are invaluable. These diagrams are incredible, and I really want to start, I want to find these and get these things in larger poster form, because they really make you think. And he comes up with his own quadrant type of theory and his own versor system also, which is actually quite fascinating. So I think it's really something worth looking at, even though, of course, you know, your establishment scientist or engineer would hate this person with a passion.
Right.
They also hate what I'm doing with a passion, too. So I guess that makes it good.
So we're here with Eric Dollard. This is middle of January 2014, and we just went over the new book he's working on, which is part 2 to the four-quadrant representation of electricity, which goes into all the polyphase mathematics, unifying that with the music of Bach. You can look for that video on YouTube, and there'll be links posted in Eric Dollard's thread. And if you don't know, Eric Dollard's username in Energetic Forum is T-Rex, like the dinosaur. Okay, so Eric's current project is an Advanced Seismic Warning System, which is the most sensitive, most advanced earthquake warning system ever developed. But before we touch on that, we just want to cover just a couple points on the cosmic induction generator. The last couple times I was down here at EPD Laboratories, which is Eric's nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting his work. John Polakowski was here working on the cosmic induction generator. You can see some of the photos posted in Energetic Forum, and I took quite a few pictures and video footage, which will be coming out pretty soon. And so for, you know, quite a few of you who have been following Eric and his work and the different campaigns going on to raise funds, the Cosmic Induction Generator project is moving forward. And when I was down here,
Serviced televisions in the town of Yucca Valley and 29 Palms had found that the telluric currents had reached such a magnitude that the magnetic field resulting from those currents had permanently magnetized the shadow mass in the television picture tubes and rendered them junk because they could not be demagnetized. The magnitude of current impulse to do that would have to be in the order of 5 or 10 million amps. So I take a certain radio frequency component out of this. Basically, the signals, the telluric signals themselves initially were regarded as interference, and they're a significant interference impairment to Navy submarine communications, and that's kind of how this whole project came about with RCA. RCA wanted me to develop a new type of communications medium for the maritime business, which I did. The telluric transmission transformer from basically Tesla's design, the cosmic induction generator being 2 of them shorted on each other so they can't transmit but concentrate the field. So we're basically, all these projects are pretty much unified on the basic electrostatic Tesla technology. So then that was the initial system at Landers. So once I had the frequencies and the time periods and everything identified, then I could start to actually engineer networks to extract these frequencies and deliver them to relays or chart recorders or sounders or whatever. Plus, the sounds of the signals themselves are audible. There is access to these sounds on a very limited basis through the special electrostatic amplifiers that are built by a person named Steve McGreevy, who has a website on this where you can actually hear some of these earth sounds. Some of them are so fantastic they're beyond belief. I think that's the best introduction people can get, is to find Steve McGreevy's website, and he will custom build a electrostatic amplifier receiving system for you where you can start to gain access to these signals, but without a full-size Alexanderson antenna and the proper grounding system, the interference from power lines, all these things become magnified in these devices, so you have to get out into the wilderness in order to properly receive, and you still ultimately can't reject all the interference, but it's a very cheap and easy way to start.
So his name is Steve McGreevy. I think one of his websites might be Auroral Chorus, something like that.
Yes, that sounds right, yeah.
And so he's known for using like these big loop type antennas or something, and he's picking up sounds from the Aurora Borealis.
And from the inside of the Earth and
Okay.
many other places, but the devices cannot distinguish between the signals. It takes a more advanced antenna system.
Okay.
So you could, with a keen ear, with one of Steve McGreevy's devices in an interference-free location, as long as there's no wind generating electrostatic or there's no coyotes running around with, sparks on their hair. These things are very sensitive, but in the proper circumstance, you can hear the earthquake signals with your own ear before the earthquake happens.
Mm-hmm. And he can plot these out and basically show kind of what's going on, and any earthquake maybe about 6.5 and above, he's able to show you the activity leading up to that, up to 48 hours ahead of time, which obviously the implications of that, besides it being just an fairly profound science project or experiment, is that the bottom line is that potentially this can save lives when this type of system is replicated and put up through replicated in multiple parts around the world. So do you want to talk a little bit about the earthquake system? I think most people that's following your work know about it from Landers.
Yeah, Landers was a fully engineered working facility that actually did pick up precursors of major earthquakes. Ironically, the first one was the Landers earthquake, which, if I wasn't there myself at the time, but the people that were there operating the equipment gave me the rundown on what had transpired electrically. It started about 2 days beforehand, and then about 18 hours before the actual event became so severe that the property owner and the operator of the equipment started making emergency telephone calls to his electronics tech at the Marine base next door to us, until finally the guy came out and determined, that something was going on. And then sure enough, the next morning was the earthquake. The electrical activity of the earthquake was so intense that this particular technician, who also at that time served...
John had put it all together, and with Eric's assistance, Eric was tuning it up, and it was a successful run. It worked. And John Polakowski is going to be releasing more information on that. I'll be putting out some videos and photos on these successful tests, showing it actually working. And in the meantime, John is going to be working on a higher power supply for this to increase the effects and what the cosmic induction generator does. And John will be presenting and giving a live demonstration of the cosmic induction generator at the 2014 Science and Technology Conference, which you can find out about in energeticforum.com or energyscienceforum.com. And so just so that you know, a lot of the support of Eric's work over the last 6-9 months plus has been very fruitful. The experiments are moving forward with the cosmic induction generator, and it's been a great success so far, and you'll get to see that pretty soon. So on the side of that, Eric is working on the Advanced Seismic Warning System, which is an earthquake forecasting system where he's able to translate these earth signals down in the earth into sound or different we say signals on scopes and different types of measuring devices that can take these different signals